So today we're talking about the Christmas story, but we're taking a deeper look at it. Ernest Holmes has one of the best suggestions that I have ever heard concerning the entire Bible. And he said, when we consider the Bible and all its teachings as an inner journey, we then come to understand the true meaning and guidance that is available. I love that statement because it does cause us to take a deeper consideration. The thing that inspired me several years ago when I first came up with this idea of a deeper consideration was is all led by the statement that Jesus said that says, "All that I have done, you can do and more." And I always wondered about that. I remember hearing that as a kid, wondering, well, okay, if that's true, then why are we being taught that we can't do anything like Jesus did? And I got in trouble because of my way of thinking several times. And voicing it. Yeah, I couldn't keep my mouth shut on it. But that got me thinking, and then when I read this statement by Ernest Holmes, it all kind of clicked. I said, oh, let's take a deeper look at this. Well, the Christmas story was one that I decided to take a deeper look at because there are so many incredible lessons and meanings that we can use in our life. So for anyone who considers the Christmas story or any other Bible story to be a historical fact, I just want to tell you right now, this deeper consideration does not take away from that historical story that you read. Because even in those stories, whether they be true or not, in those stories there's some great lessons. Even if you just take them as surface, here's what's written, there's lessons to be learned. Okay? I'm not here to fight for historical fact or not. That's beside the point. Because we're going deeper. We're going to take it deeper. And this deeper consideration, like I said, it doesn't take away from historical fact. It actually validates the historical fact in ways. So we begin the deeper consideration of the Christmas story with the angels appearing to Mary and Joseph. Now, most of us think of angels as like right here, the little cherub-looking thing and the wings flapping around, and some of them have the more majestic-looking angels. Most of the time, angels are beautiful. They're lit up in light. They're really something pleasant. It makes me wonder just how they are, because both of them when they approached Mary and Joseph, told them both, first thing, do not be afraid. Makes me wonder if they really are that beautiful. What's showing up here? Might have just been because it startled them. They just popped. They may be gorgeous and they popped up out of nowhere. Oh, don't be afraid. We don't know. They don't tell us that. It just the angel said, do not be afraid. I think that it goes into what they were telling them more so than how they looked, how they appeared. We would think that visit from the angel would be, this is awesome. This is cool. But just imagine that. Just imagine for a moment. Mary and Joseph, different times, being approached by angels, given a message. And you think about the message they were given about this child that was about to come into their life. That had to scare the poop out of them. Now imagine, today it would be scary. Think of the times then when a person out of wedlock becoming pregnant, or a woman out of wedlock becoming pregnant, would probably be killed, probably be stoned. The man who was supposedly watching over her to make sure that didn't happen would probably be stoned, or at least thrown out of the community. They had much to fear. So there was a lot going on there. Here's this message that scares them. What can we take from that? How many messages do we get scare us to death? And now these messages don't necessarily come to us by this big light coming down and an angel appearing with these wingspan bigger than this house. They might. I've never had that happen. But they may be messages through something you watch on TV. They may be messages through something said by a friend or an acquaintance or somebody you walk past in a store. They may be messages of something you read, like this thing that I read from Ernest Holmes. But our human tendency is when we get these messages and it scares us, no, I'm going this way. We tend to turn it off, ignore it, push it aside. We get caught up in the I'm not good enough. Oh, there's no way I'm capable of that. That's too good to be true. That's a joke. We get too caught up in the stuff going on in our head to listen to these messages, especially when they scare us. Mary Manning Morrissey has a quote that I absolutely love that says, when you're setting intentions, when you're setting goals, set them so big that you have to have divine intervention to make it happen. I think that's what's happening when these thoughts come in that we're afraid of, that scare us, that cause us to think, no, there's no way. I think that those thoughts are the ones that require the divine intervention, and that scares us. Because see, as humans, we like to think that we are in control. We like to think that I can do it all on my own. I don't need anybody's help. Well, that's where the light of the star comes in, which we're going to talk about in a minute. But these angels, they come to us in many different ways. There's nowhere that says the angel has to look this way. There's nowhere that says a message can only come to you this way. So this message in this part of the story is, do not be afraid. Do not fear. When you have those thoughts that do scare you, number one, know the truth within you, that you are an expression of God, that God is in you, as you, through you. So there is nothing too big for God. Which means there's nothing too big for us. So when you have those messages that scare you, just remember your truth and consider that message on a deeper level. Let fear be a call to action. And that action is not to run away. The timing of the angel's appearance give us one spark of encouragement that we can latch hold of. So these angels appeared before anything happened. There was no physical evidence whatsoever in play when these angels came in with these messages. That tells us that God is already in, as and through us and everything. So these things that just appear out of nowhere, that scare us, that we want to run away from, there's already, the whole scenario is already in place. All we have to do is tune into the divinity of it, tune into the God of it, and let that be our focus, let that be our guidance. Now to the birth of Jesus. This birth of this little boy represents the awakening of awareness of the Christ mind. The Christ mind has been always. The Christ mind is the one mind, the God mind. One and the same. It always has been. It's infinite. No beginning, no ending. What this birth represents is the recognition of it, the awakening to it. That little boy was born so that the Christ mind could take human form to represent what was possible for all people. We go back to what Jesus said, all that I have done you can do and more. That little boy was born and the Christ mind made manifest in him in such a way that everyone could see it. He says you've got it too. You've got it too. Some religions talk about being reborn. This is a mental rebirth. I was taught that, okay, when you're reborn, you've got to change all of these habits. You've got to create new habits. It's deeper than that, folks. It's the thought process. It's not that the thought process you had was wrong, it's that your thought process was on a human level. And to fully align with the Christ mind, you elevate that into the Christ mind level, a spiritual understanding, a spiritual knowing. And you're not going to get it all in one shot. You're not going to be able to walk up to an altar, kneel down and say, do it now. You're going to get some when you do that. But the process of opening up your thought and your beliefs is infinite. Because the spiritual truth of this universe, of everything, is infinite. We're not just going to all of a sudden have it all. How boring would that be? It would be exciting for a little while, but I know for me, if I'm not learning something, I'm bored. And if I get bored, YouTube, come on. Let's watch some videos. If I get bored, I'm not producing. I'm not learning. Jesus' birth occurred in conditions that, according to today's standards, will be considered third world. It shows up in a city that's overcrowded. That's so overcrowded there's no place to stay. So they have to put him in a stable, in the manger. This would be taboo for most people. The beauty of this, though, is the meaning, the deeper meaning of it all. The stable was a connection. The stable for people of that time, similar to barns of the ranchers of today, except you think about they didn't have fences to let them out in. The stable was a place to come together, to bring their flocks. It was a connection between civilization and nature. That's very much what this represented here. It brought together all. It was for the people of the city. It was for the people of the land, the people of nature. It was a gathering spot. The manger actually holds some pretty incredible meaning as well. The manger at that time was carved out of rock in most cases. It was carved out of rock, and it was used only for the best of the livestock, the best of the best. This tells us that the best of the best, this Christ mind in human form, deserved the best of the best. We have to place this Christ mind, the best of the best of us, into that level of thinking, that level of knowing. It is the best. Let's treat it as such. Let's don't just every once in a while tune into it. Oh, I'm having a really bad day today. Today's just kind of sucked. Let's turn into my Christ self. we cheat ourselves by doing that. That serves a purpose. If you can do that when you're in a bad place, do it. But also do it when you're in a great place. See how this divine thinking, this spiritual knowing, truth, can elevate you even further. Not just from a bad spot, but from good spots as well. This manger, to me, this manger is that spot where consciousness, mindfulness, recognizes truth. We've got the truth of our spiritual self, the truth of God, being God expressions. We've got the human form. Well, here's that manger. It all comes together. It's not that this is false, because we are in human form. It's that it all comes together and we can blend them and we can use them both. We can experience them both. That's what the manger is to me. The details of Jesus' birth, being born in that stable and placed in that manger, as beautiful it is when you look deeper, even if you didn't go deeper, this story tells us that it's not the beginning that matters. You would think that if Jesus was to be king, Savior, that he would have been born into these incredible conditions. You know, in a castle somewhere with a bed of gold. But he wasn't. He was born in third world conditions and still rose to that level of prominence that we have given him. It wasn't that he went out and made a fortune and bought his way into it. It was that he taught what he believed, what he knew to be true. And he lived it and he experienced it. It doesn't matter where we start. It does not matter your history. Because your history does not define you. You are defined by your truth that you are a spiritual being having a human experience. You are one in God. And that truth is all that matters. So it doesn't matter where you start. It does matter where you are in your thinking, in your thought process, in your belief process. Jesus was the example of how to live this human experience. He did so through the Christ consciousness, which we all have. We are born with it. And the thing about it, it's kind of like a tool, though. Yeah, we're born with it. It's like us being given just the most incredible tool. If you were a woodworker, it's this beautiful saw that you can cut anything with. But then you don't use the saw, you just put it on a shelf somewhere. It collects dust. As far as the way we experience this life, Christ's mind is the same way. If we don't use it, we don't know how life can be. It's always in action. Christ's mind is always there. It's always working. It's always available. But we have to pull it off the shelf. We have to use it. Jesus told us, "It is done as you believe." So if you believe that task that the angel presented to you that scares you to death is impossible, it is done. Just like you believe. If you believe you can do a little bit of it, but not the whole thing, it is done as you believe. So grasp the truth. You have Christ mind awareness. God is working in you, as you, through you. Nothing is impossible. When you can bring those into your belief beyond a shadow of a doubt, there's not anything impossible. You can do it. So we're going to move through the rest of the symbols of the Christmas story pretty quickly here. The star, for instance, I told you we'd come back to that. The star is the light of God within. It's the light revealing Christ consciousness within. The star represents a beacon of truth. You know, the only thing that stood out from the star that they refer to in the Bible and every other star, the other millions of stars in the sky, was the fact that that one caught attention. It caught focus. It caught intention. People saw it. People tuned into it. And it led them. We get caught up in our own need to guide our own course, thinking, you know, if I can do it, I can. Especially men, y'all can do it. The light tells us there is another form of guidance. There's another light shining the way. Cost you nothing. Tune into it and let it, just follow it. The stable in the relationship of God with all of creation. It is divinity blended with material. The stable represents our connection to all of creation. It is the space within from which everything new is born. So we all have that stable within us. It's that space within where everything new is born. It's that thought process. Every new idea is through the divinity of that stable. The shepherds, they represent the protection and guidance of God in our lives. Shepherds tended to the flocks, they fed them, they kept them safe, nurtured them, provided for them. The shepherds represent the divine nurturing that's already provided for us within us, even when we don't realize that it's there. You know, it's pretty easy when we get sick to get into that poor me and have a little pity party. Forget that things could be a lot worse. We forget that there is a level of wellness within us that's keeping us going. And we certainly forget that in the spiritual scheme of things, all is perfect. The shepherds can help us get there. Those shepherds within, that wisdom, that nurturing, that guidance. The beautiful story of Jesus' birth tells us that when we open to and embrace the Christ consciousness within, when we allow the light of God to shine brightly within us, the protection and guidance that is already present is revealed. We need not search for it, beg for it, or even ask for it. We simply open awareness to it and receive it. It is ours. How beautiful is that? The best thing we can ask for. Guidance, nurturing, love. We don't have to search for it. We don't have to earn it. We just have to open awareness to it, receive it. It's already ours. The wise men in this story they're probably the most fascinating part of the story for me. Because they represent wisdom. But it's important to note that there's very little explanation to why these guys are considered wise. They could have been the Dumb and Dumber crew, right, for all we know. They really didn't tell us. But they called them wise for some reason. Had there been detailed description about these guys, I think the temptation would have been to seek out that type of person and consider them wise and then nobody else. But the lack of description tells me that the wisdom is not necessarily that human form that's out there. It's what is offered through the connection, the spiritual connection, the energy, maybe the journey that they were on. You know, I'm not real sure what it is because, like I said, there's very little detail on it. But it would have been easy to seek out that type of person and then follow them, give them more power than they deserve. You know, put them into a Jesus level outlook. And that it wasn't important who these guys were as much so as they came. Now, they came from the east, which is very, very important. If you think about the location, if you look at a globe, and you think about that location, from the east was Asia. At that time, Asia represented many different religious thought processes, spiritual community thought process. Hindu, Buddhism being the biggest of the ones that I'm aware of. Now, contrary to what most Christians believe, Hinduism, Buddhism have been around a whole lot longer than Christianity. They've been around a whole lot longer even than Judaism. These men coming from the East say that something's happening outside of the Judaism belief, the Jewish religion. These guys are coming. So what does that tell? That tells us that this Christ mind, this Christ system of knowing, this truth that Jesus represented is bigger than Judaism, which makes it bigger than Christianity. It is the umbrella through which all of humanity can come to know truth. See, these wise men were pretty cool dudes. They bring around even more to consider, because it goes beyond the scope of what the Bible taught. Some people might call that sacrilegious. If it were sacrilegious, I would have to ask, why then would the Bible have mentioned it? If I'm supposed to just take just what's written in the Bible as the only truth, why mention these guys that came from the East? So I think we have to look at that. The wisdom, again, is not something that we have to go in search of. It's something that's already within us. It represents a balance between human, spiritual, between ego, essence. It's not that one is bad. It's that we have to have that blend in order to understand both. The wise men in this story help us find this balance. I didn't make note of it, but there is a beautiful, they brought the frankincense, myrrh, is it gold? Gold, frankincense, and myrrh. They brought those, and each one of those represents something incredible, and I can't remember now what they were. But, so we won't go there. The wise men also show us this universal God presence. It just shows us. With them coming from the East, it shows us that God is everywhere present. Whether you believe it through Buddhism, through Hinduism, whether you call God Allah, or I can't remember the other name I was going to. Whatever you call God, if you are thinking of the Creator of all, the one wisdom, the one power, the one presence, you're thinking of the same thing. There are many perceived evils spoken of in this Christmas story, especially if you get into the expanded one after Jesus was born and they're traveling back home. These simply represent the hurdles and the blocks that stand before us, and when allowed, they prevent us from living our truth. To these perceived evils, we remember the words of the angels. Fear not. Fear not. If we don't take anything else away from this story other than fear not, we have succeeded. We have succeeded. There was once a popular question that was called, the question was, what would Jesus do? I would like for you to change that a little bit and refer to it as, what would the Christ do? Because when we think of it as what would Jesus do, we think of it as somebody out there, outside of us, has to do something. When we change that to what would the Christ do, Now we're turning it on us. Not us in the human form, us in the Christ form. The Christ within us has all the answers, all the guidance, all the love, everything that we could ever possibly need. The answers we seek, the guidance we desire, the nurturing we need are all fully present in our lives already, right now. No waiting required. The answer we look for is the Christ within. And that's what this Christmas story is all about. So let's pray. Father God, we are so grateful that we can experience the Christ consciousness right now, right here. Through this awareness, we can more fully experience the omnipresence, omnipotence, and omniscience of you in us, as us, through us. We ask today that our awareness and understanding of Christ consciousness within and everywhere present, we ask that it expand and be more fully experienced, knowing the fullness and perfection of the Christ consciousness that is already available. Let us more fully awaken to its presence. Knowing this prayer is already made manifest and we need only open our hearts and minds to receive it, we say thank you, and so it is. Amen.